And hopefully the topics I will cover today will give you some tips in terms of how you would, maybe approach your senior executives to get more funding for your automation program. How would you would structure your teams to support the current as well as the future demand for automation, and really what sort of talent you would need to build up a center of excellence, for example, and what sort of training do you need to provide to the people that want to participate in your automation program. So we'll cover those in bits and pieces, and hopefully, you'll take away a few things from today's session. What I encourage you to do is, of course, use the Q&A box in Zoom that's available in Zoom. I'll check the Q&A box, regularly to see if there are any questions that we can answer. You don't have to wait until the end of the presentation to ask questions. Okay, so let's get right to it. In Uipath, we have this vision of fully automated enterprise. It's a vision, it's also a mindset, right? So what differentiates a fully automated enterprise from a traditional enterprise? A traditional enterprise typically look at automation as an afterthought, right? They have a process that they've designed, and then that's now operational. And then whenever they hit some bottlenecks or some issues, or they're missing their KPIs, then they look at the possibility of automating that process. So it's a more of a reactive approach. That's typically what we see in a traditional enterprise. But a fully automated enterprise is a lot more proactive when it comes to automation. When they're designing a process, they're already looking at the most efficient ways to leverage robots and humans, right? What sort of activities within my process can I fully automate, and what part of the process still needs to be done by humans, right? So they're designing their process in a way where they're finding the most sense that, or finding the greatest impact that automation can deliver to their business, right? And I'll give you an example of, how having this mindset, an automation first mindset, actually helps. So we are, a large company. We have about 3,000 employees worldwide. And because of the sort of the new normal of working remotely, we are also a heavy user of Zoom, right? All of our employees actually have a Zoom account, and they're all Zoom Pro accounts, right? But when we did some analysis, we noticed that we're paying Zoom quite a lot of money, actually, because you have 3,000 accounts, all Zoom Pro accounts. And then when we drill down further, we actually noticed that not a lot of our employees, in fact, 80% of our employees aren't using the pro features of Zoom, meaning only 20% of our employees are really organizing external meetings with more than 3 participants. They're the ones that are doing meetings for longer than 45 minutes. Because if you, let's say, downgrade a person's account from a Zoom Pro to a Zoom Basic, they can still use Zoom, but they can do one-on-one meetings. They can still have meetings with more than 3 people, but limited to 45 minutes, right? So there are still Zoom features that we can take advantage of without having to pay for the Pro subscription. So when IT was asked, hey, how come we're paying Zoom so much money? Again, the automation mindset of our own IT team kicked in and said, you know what we can do is, automate every hour. We look at what Zoom accounts are not being fully, Zoom Pro accounts are not being fully leveraged. We'll downgrade them to Zoom Basic. But if a user decides to organize a meeting involving more than 3 people, then the robot will also automatically upgrade their Zoom subscription to a Zoom Pro account. But if they become an idle user again, we'll downgrade them. So again, this automation mindset kicked in. And even though it's quite a cumbersome process to actually do this, we have a tool that we could use, which is RPA, right? And this automation mindset really allowed our IT team to be creative. And the ultimate benefit that it gives a company is 100K of savings a year at the minimum. This is a very conservative estimate, but 100K US dollars per year saved by simply developing a robot that upgrades and downgrades the Zoom accounts of every individual in our company. Because again, we might be paying for something that we're not fully leveraging. And again, that automation mindset really helped us in a lot of areas, of course, from a productivity perspective, and at the same time, from a lowering cost or cost reduction perspective. So and I really hope, again, parts of what I mentioned today would really resonate, and would encourage you to look at automation as really a strategic capability that your enterprise would want to embrace. So hopefully, yeah, maybe it's a tip for everyone as well that might be using Zoom as a collaboration tool. Do look into the possibility of downgrading some of your users to Zoom Basic, and see if that helps your company save some money. And again, talking again about a fully automated enterprise. These are enterprises that have assigned automatable work to robots, where the robots are doing the mundane, the repetitive, and the robots make a lot of these back office activities invisible, right? Because they just get done automatically. Fully automated enterprises also look into the possibility of providing a robot for every person in the company. And I have a really good example for this, which is our experience in Uipath about having a robot for every person, right? Because obviously we have access to the technology, having developed this capability, and we are truly embracing automation as part of our culture. Democratizing development. For some of you who have participated in the previous webinar that we did, actually it was a hands-on workshop. You probably saw that, developing automation on RPA doesn't really require that you have a programming skill, because it uses the concept of low code sort of application development to allow you to build simple to complex automation actually without having to write code. And I have some examples later of how I built my own automation using our development tool called Studio X, and how it helps me in my day-to-day, right? And fully automated enterprises also unleash AI across every facet of work. It's combining RPA and AI to really allow us to build smart robots that can execute the mundane and repetitive, but also execute some of the cognitive activities that will typically requires people. But with, of course, machine learning and artificial intelligence, we're going to be able to automate certain activities. Like, for example, in insurance, there's already a lot of automation that helps with performing claims assessment. It's no longer done by a person. It's now being done by a robot with the aid of an ML model, right? Or whether it's a customer churn analysis, it's no longer done by a person, but it's done by a robot plus a machine learning model. So a fully automated enterprise has a little bit more time to invest in AI, because they've automated a lot of the back office work that needs to be done, and it allowed them to then put people in higher value activities such as analytics, data science, to be able to further leverage on technologies that are available nowadays. People can build machine learning models without necessarily coding as well. There's what we call auto ML, or auto machine learning tools, where you just supply the data and it automatically builds a model for you. So there's certainly areas in AI that you can continue to invest in if you're able to alleviate a lot of the manual repetitive work and upskill your teams to be able to take advantage of the technology available. All right. So a fully automated enterprise, of course, sees accelerated results from automation. And these are some of the top benefits that a lot of organizations are receiving from their investments on automation. Of course, things like speed of response, speed of delivery of services, reduction of errors, mistakes, right? These are very, very clear benefits that you'll get from automation. Of course, things like increasing work without hiring more headcount, right? This is probably very, very true. It's about doing more with the same. I think we don't really see the doing more with less type of situation. I haven't seen a company that's fired people because now their work is being automated by robots. It's about being able to take on increased workloads without necessarily having to hire more people. And this has been the benefit that a lot of organizations that have invested in automation are reaping at the moment. Reduction of repetitive, sorry for the misspelling there, administrative work, reduction in, of course, headcount in staff intensive areas. And the value that a lot of our customers are also getting is around increasing of the customer satisfaction, because organizations that are automated are able to respond to their customers much, much faster. And, sort of a different spin to the benefits, for a regular enterprise, you have people and systems performing back office work, while in a fully automated enterprise, robots are, executing the repetitive, the mundane activities, and employees are free to perform higher value work, right? Again, a regular enterprise, their day-to-day includes repetitive low-value activities, whilst in a fully automated enterprise, employees are empowered to automate their own tasks, right? In a regular enterprise, you have automation efforts that are in silos. Each department has its own ability to choose their own tool and, implement automation the way they deem fit. While in a fully automated enterprise, there's a more structured way of making training available, and anyone who wants to be a developer can be a developer, because they have access to the right trainings, the right skills, and the right tools. And organizations that are, traditional, want to go for AI but can't do so, while in a fully automated enterprise, they're able to take advantage of AI and operationalize machine learning models that they develop by combining it with RPA, right? And organizations that are fully automated greatly benefit from the accelerated benefits that they get from combining RPA and AI. And going into, again, the first pillar that you saw me talk about earlier, the assigning of automatable work to robots, right? According to McKinsey, there's 3.6 trillion hours of work each year that's automatable. And this is only from developed countries, right? And so we definitely see a lot of opportunities to further improve productivity in organizations, regardless of industry, right? So of course, you see a lot of RPA adoption in, banking and finance, in manufacturing, in telco, but definitely, regardless of which industry you're in, there's definitely a lot of repetitive, mundane activities, especially, in functions like finance, in HR, in IT. A lot of you are from IT, and you could definitely, put in an effort to look for automation opportunities in each of those areas, right? So anything that requires reading a document and then entering the data into a system, that's definitely something that can be automated with RPA. And the technology around what we call document data capture is maturing significantly as well. So the reliability of using a document data capture solution, extracting data from invoices, receipts, purchase orders, bank statements, utility bills, that capability is matured a lot. And if you still have people that are scanning documents and then reading those documents and then entering them manually into a system, you should definitely look into automating those activities. And of course, on the IT side, fulfillment of IT service requests, whether it's simple things like password resets, or giving someone access to a shared folder, or creating a new SharePoint site for a project team, or whether it's cloud orchestration, like spinning up a VM instance in AWS, and then creating the appropriate network security groups, the necessary firewall rules, and all these things that might be part of a day-to-day of an AWS engineer, right? These are things that you can automate with RPA also. Or if you're a security professional and you're monitoring alerts that are coming from your security incident and event management tool, your SIEM tool, right? Telling you that there's a denial of service attack. Any activity that you need to perform to, let's say, ensure that those DDoS attacks are closed by going to your router, your switches, to whichever, your intrusion prevention system to block out a specific IP address. Those activities can also be automated through RPA. And guess what? A robot can act on those incidents a lot faster than a human could, right? Because if it's in the middle of the night and there's a DDoS attack, then you have to wait until you wake up someone before that particular incident is remediated. So you could potentially use robots to speed up the response and remediation process when it comes to security incidents. So do explore these areas. Of course, this is a limited set of activities that you could automate using robots, but do what Dr. Frank Schuler of DHL did, which is to really invest in automation as part of their digital transformation effort and continuously identify time-consuming, manual, repetitive things that will allow them to free up their internal resources so that they can focus on providing the best services they could for their customers and partners. So again, one aspect of a fully automated enterprise is that you automated a lot of the mundane and repetitive and have given that responsibility to robots. Another aspect of a fully automated enterprise, providing a robot for every person, right? But what value will this give you? Will it be just expensive investments in robots that won't generate returns? The reality is, if you put in enough automation, even if it saves a person maybe an hour a day, collectively throughout the organization, the benefits can be really, really large, right? And what are we talking about when we say a robot for every person? It's really about automating a lot of the, let's say I spend most of 25% of my time performing a specific activity, right? If I can automate 70% of that, then that's a significant reduction in terms of time spent on manual repetitive things that I could use for doing analysis, doing higher value work. But at the same time, you do have certain things like applying for a leave. Yes, it seems simple enough that you just need to go to your leave system and put in the dates and that's it. But the reality, there's a lot of activities that surround going on vacation, right? You have to apply for the leave. You have to set your out of office notification in Outlook, for example. You need to maybe update your status in tools like Slack, and so on and so forth. And maybe you also need to look at what are the meetings that you've accepted during the time that you're doing a time off and decline those invitations so that people won't expect that you're attending. So again, there are a lot of activities surrounding that vacation time that actually, if we look at how much time collectively the whole organization is putting in to apply for leave, to set up out of office notification, to decline all the meeting invites that they've accepted during the time that they're on vacation, the benefits could add up. So if I were to write an automation like an out of office robot that will help me create the leave request, put in the out of office notification, decline all the meetings that I've accepted during the time that I'll be on PTO, and instead of maybe spending 30 minutes on that process, I spend 1 minute, right? And all of these things are done on my behalf by a robot. So again, a robot for every person is really about what can we automate for that particular person, what work in that person's department can we automate, and what type of activities we could automate for the whole company. And this is what we call universal automation, right? Things like what I said, what I just talked about, out of office, right? Creating an automation that will help me apply for leave, put in the out of office notification, and decline all the meetings that I've accepted. Maybe you also have people that need to send out PDFs, and some of the sensitive information will need to be redacted. And this type of process takes a while because you have to read every document, redact the information before you're able to send it out. Like what if there's a robot that can do that for you, right? Or a meeting assistant that will automatically join Zoom 5 minutes before a meeting has started, so that you're not struggling trying to find the Zoom application, clicking on the join button when it's like 1 minute before the meeting starts, right? So wouldn't it be nice to have an assistant that will automatically join those meetings 5 minutes in advance, right? Or we all have to work with PDFs once in a while, and you need to split PDFs sometimes, and give someone a copy of the first 2 pages out of the 10 pages that you have, right? So again, a lot of these automation we call universal automation, and we've developed it for our own use in Uipath. But these are also automation that we're sharing to the community. If any of you feel that you will benefit from the automation that's listed here, guess what? They're in our website, marketplace.uipath.com. You can download the code, deploy it in your enterprise, and maybe start using them. Of course, you might need to modify them because they're the automation that you see here were designed around the tools that we use at Uipath, but certainly beats having to start from scratch, right? So universal automation, and we'll continue to build more and continue to share the automation that we build with our community, right? So we talked about the out of office robot, and actually I'll quickly play this video. So let me maybe just go through this in fast forward, right? So once you run this robot, it guides you through the process, right? First is it greets you with a form, and then it prompts you for the dates that you want to select for your leave, right? The start date of your leave, the end date of your leave, and you key that information in, of course, right? Because the robot won't be able to guess when you want to go for time off. And then the next thing that it does is to create an out of office notification automatically, that particular message that you want to give to people that writes you an email during the time that you're on vacation, automatically putting in the dates, right? But if you want to modify this, like for example, the default message is for anything urgent, please call my cell phone, but it doesn't include your cell phone. So you might want to modify this default message, right, by adding in your mobile number, right? And then hitting next. So after that, it gives you a list of the meetings that you've accepted during the time that you're on vacation. And some of us, even though you're on vacation, if you've already accepted the meeting, you just keep it, right? You still attend. But if you want to send either a tentative or decline those meetings, you can do so from this particular form. You don't have to open up Outlook, go to the dates that you're on vacation, open each invite one by one. If let's say I want to decline all of this, I just click cancel on all the meetings that I've already accepted during the time that I'm on time off, right? And then that cancellation or declining that meeting is automatically handled by the robot. Okay, as you can see there. And do you want to create your PTO request in Workday? In Uipath, we use Workday, but maybe for some of you, you use SAP, or you might use a different leave request system. But yeah, if I say yes, then it logs into Workday for me. And then actually you'll see at this stage, let me just fast forward again. It's gonna click on the request absence button and then put in the dates, right? All right, so So that's really, the type of automation that we're developing in what we call universal automation. And if you have, a good handful of these universal automation that benefits all employees or benefits a specific department or benefits a specific individual, collectively, all of these automation will actually, save a lot of time for each employee and of course collectively as well. Everyone in the organization benefits from automation. Okay, so that's one example. I have other examples here. Of course, like I said, these are all available in Uipath Marketplace. PDF redaction. I won't show you a demo, but what this does is, if you have a PDF, for example, and you want to redact things like people's name, IC numbers, phone numbers, addresses, because you want to share the general content of a specific document, but redact personally identifiable information. We actually have a robot that does this, because obviously in Uipath, we share information with external parties, our partners, our suppliers, our customers, and sometimes we do need to redact personally identifiable information. So this is another, automation that we built that we're sharing with the community. And meeting assistant, this is what I was saying earlier, right? 10 minutes before, or a few minutes before, I think this is 10 minutes before, yeah, a meeting starts, the robot presents you with this form showing your next meeting, and all you have to do is click on start meeting, and it does everything for you, right? It goes to Zoom, starts your meeting, or you join that meeting. It goes to Slack, changes your status in Slack to say, I'm busy. And then it brings up a new page in OneNote, right? Because you might want to take notes during that meeting. So again, a lot of the things that you would have done manually in preparation for joining a meeting and while you're in the meeting is handled automatically by your meeting assistant, right? That runs right on your desktop. So again, these are just a few of the examples of the universal automation that we have built and are sharing in Uipath Marketplace. Okay. So I hope that was useful. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat window, all right? And I'll be happy to address them in sort of near real time. And I'd like to give you a really quick view of, what that robot for every person strategy is within Uipath. So basically what I have here is what we call the Uipath Assistant, right? So if it's not there, it's just running behind the scenes. It's in my tray. I can bring it up anytime. And then, whether I want to, set the out of office, kind of like what the video that I showed earlier, or just simply update my Slack status, or I want to, request a T&E report for all my direct reports, because obviously I'm responsible for a cost center in our company, and I want to make sure that everyone stays within our T&E allowance. So I can do that very easily. I don't have to go launch into our Concur and generate that report manually. I could do it in one click, right? There are also, activities that are automated that it's very specific to my role. For example, in global services, right? I can create a value calculator. Let's say I want to show the ROI of investing in RPA. A robot will guide me through how to create a value calculator for, let's say, a customer or a prospect, right? Or there's also, I think somewhere here, a demo robot right here, right? If I want to demo our Automation Hub product, I can get a robot to do it for me. Actually, the robot will not do the demo. I will still do the demo, but it will set up all the necessary screens so that I can deliver a demo of Automation Hub, for example. Or if I want to demo our product called Task Capture, again, a robot will assist me in setting up everything that's required so I can start delivering a live demo of Task Capture. So again, a lot of work that's automated, that's meant for me and my department, but also a lot of automation that will benefit the whole company because everyone can certainly use an out of office robot or a meeting assistant, or updating their Slack or snipping a part of the screen, doing an OCR, etc., etc. Okay. All right. Next is really around democratizing development, right? So, some of you who joined the last session definitely got an experience in building automation using Uipath Studio. And the reality is, regardless of the RPA solution that you've chosen, the fact is, our RPA vendors have been um, trying their best to ensure that not not only will people that have a solid IT background or programming background, not only those people can be effective in developing automation, but everyone who has an interest in picking up RPA development skills would be able to do so. And according to Ms. Christina Sia from Vital, a government agency, um, they did recognize that RPA development is not for everyone. But at the same time, they were surprised that they were able to upskill certain individuals that did not fit the typical profile, right? Someone who doesn't come with a background in IT, someone who doesn't have programming skills, but they were still able to pick up the skills of RPA development after attending some training courses and after shadowing some people who have more experience, right? And at the same time, in Singtel, Mr. Sharon Lam shared their digital transformation journey and how their employees were part of that journey, right? To and they were able to upskill their empower their employees to build their own robots. In fact, they published some videos, they participated in previous UiPath events and shared their story. So yeah, Singtel is definitely another company that's definitely embraced RPA and have been advocating what we call citizen development, right? And citizen development is a key approach as well to ensure that you have the ability to really scale the adoption of RPA. Because if you rely on a central team to deliver all the automation, then you're not getting the speed and the scale that you probably need. By looking for people that have the potential to develop their own automation, then your central team can focus on the more sort of complex interdepartmental type of automation, while your citizen developers focus on automation that's meant for their own use or meant for their department's use, right? And they can automate a lot of the simple to medium complexity type of automation, while again, your central team focuses on the highly complex and typically the interdepartmental type of automation. Okay. And lastly, it's about unleashing AI across every facet of work. So we did we looked at studies done by Accenture and Gartner, and a lot of executives actually recognize that their business would be deploying AI across their organization. According to the Gartner study, 80% of those that have already deployed RPA will be deploying AI as well by 2022, right? And in the study done by Accenture, 75% of executives believe that they risk going out of business if they don't deploy AI, right, across their organization. So again, RPA, I would say, is a foundation for embracing AI, because you can't really spend a lot of time analyzing the data that you have, etc., if you're bogged down with the mundane and repetitive, right? So in a way, RPA is your entry point towards embracing AI, not just because you have the ability, the time now. If you've automated your process, you now have the time to analyze data and maybe pick up additional skills on data science. It's not just that. It's also the fact that when you do build an ML model, it's a lot easier to operationalize that machine learning model if you have RPA in place, right? And I'll give you an example. Let's say you're in a telco and you've developed a model that predicts customer churn, which is obviously very important for the contact center, right? Because if I'm speaking to a customer and there's a prediction that says this customer has a high likelihood of churning, maybe the contact center agent can offer some promotions, can offer an early renewal of the plan with device subsidy, right? So you can get a new phone for $200 off, something like that, just so we can keep the customer as opposed to losing that customer when the contract ends, right? But if I develop this ML model and I go to the team that developed the CRM application, they might say, oh, I need 6 months to a year to make changes to my CRM application to incorporate this machine learning model. But if you're already using RPA and it's already, let's say, automating part of the work that your contact center agents are doing, what we can do is just introduce an additional RPA workflow that connects to the ML model to generate the prediction as and when a contact center agent is speaking to a customer. And through that approach, this really, because RPA is about, unintrusive implementation, right? You're not requiring any changes to the apps and so on. You're just simply putting RPA on top of the existing applications that you have. So it's on top of the existing CRM application, on top of the model that you've developed, but it can make those two systems work together. So you're, asking the model to give you a prediction. That prediction is displayed in front of the user and potentially giving the user or the contact center agent a recommendation of the next best action, right? Whether it's to provide a promotion or early renewal of the postpaid plan, etc. Right? So again, if you have RPA in place, you're able to accelerate the adoption of those machine learning models that you're developing. Okay. All right. So let me just look at the Q&A window, whether there's anything. There's no questions yet.
Hey, Matt,
Yes.
there was an earlier question that came in via chat.
And
I kind of gave
Harish
link.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure you can add on to that with more specific use for infrastructure automation.
Sure. So yeah, so there's definitely a lot of examples. The link that you gave, Don, actually, there are at least 4 videos there, demo videos of how you could use RPA for infra automation. And it really works with a lot of the on-prem as well as the cloud technologies, right? So we do have adapters for, VMware, vCenter, Citrix Zen Server, Microsoft Hyper-V. But we also work with the cloud technologies like AWS, Microsoft Azure, and so on. And we also have integration to technologies like Microsoft Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, so that if you want to automate, employee onboarding, let's say the creation of AD accounts, the creation of email mailboxes, etc., you could actually do that using RPA. And from an infra automation perspective, what I talked about earlier, provisioning a VM, setting up all the firewall rules, we can do this. We can do this type of automation on-prem technologies as well as on the cloud. And happy to have further discussion on this with you, Harish, if you're interested to learn more about IT automation. Okay. All right. Thank you, Harish, for that question. Do keep your questions coming. Right. And I'll move forward, and maybe when we get to point number 2, we'll take a 10-minute break. But to become a fully automated enterprise, we do need to look at a few dimensions and ensure that we adopt an appropriate mindset or an appropriate strategy to ensure that we're able to scale our automation program, right? So of course, on first overall approach, we need to go beyond sort of a specialized top-down centralized approach where we're looking for opportunities to automate, but in silos. to a stage where we're combining both a top-down and a bottom-up approach. Again, having that central team, but at the same time, looking for um, non-technical people that's in the lines of business who can actually perform their own automation or deliver their own automation. So that's dimension one, which is the overall approach. Second is about the method for discovering and prioritizing automation. Of course, we all start with looking for low-hanging fruits, right? Processes that are very very obvious, that are manual and repetitive and done by a large team, and those that are you know giving us inconvenience, right? Or those that are uh, not processes that are restricting us from delivering on our KPIs, right? To a more systematic, again, top down and bottom up approach. You have teams that are looking for what can we automate that's end to end, maybe the whole order to cash process or the whole procure to pay process. We or automating the whole supply chain, right? These are people. There are teams that will be looking at automating the complex interdepartmental type of processes, but you also have a bottom up approach where people are free to identify automation opportunities. Someone helps them assess the automation opportunity and makes a decision. Hey, this one we have to take it on because it's complex. Or actually, do you want to get enablement on RPA? We can teach you how to automate the process that you want to automate, right? And you can do it yourself with our guidance. So again, we need to also mature in our ability to discover and prioritize automation opportunities. And I would say, for me, this is very, very critical, because if you want to scale your automation program, you do need to ensure that you have a good pipeline of processes that you want to automate. And that activity actually doesn't stop. You need to continue to look for more and more process. And that's really how you will drive further acceptance, further funding, and at the same time, that's really how you would get accelerated benefits from automation, by uncovering more and more automation opportunities and building it into your pipeline. Of course, upper level management support is very important. It can't be just a handful of business leaders or lines of business managers that understand what automation and the value that our automation brings. We need all stakeholders, including our C-level execs, to be championing our automation, and they are the ones that are making a decision that automation is a critical capability in ensuring the customer, in ensuring the company's success, right? Because if you don't have C-level support, then your funding will typically be on a project by project basis. You need to write a business case one after another whenever there's an opportunity to automate, as opposed to maybe a global funding where we're looking at what value can the whole company get from automation. Therefore, I can invest this amount of money to get that type of value, right? So again, we'll talk about that in a bit. And then about talent, right? How many people do we really need, and what sort of talent do they need to have to support our automation program? And I kind of like talked about funding as well when I was talking about item number 3, because in a way they're related, right? If you have C-level sponsorship, then the chances of you getting a company-wide funding versus just a process by process funding is related to how bought in your C-level execs are, right? And lastly, the operating model. This is also a very important discussion. How do you set up your teams to ensure that you're able to again have the combined top-down and bottom-up approach? And we'll cover that in detail in the next few slides. Okay. But first is the approach, right? Like I said, a lot of companies would either start at the top or at the bottom, right? So you do have companies that have decided, okay, RPA will be a strategic initiative for us, and we will invest in it, and we will look for complex interdepartmental process that could benefit from RPA and they'll make an investment there. Or there would be department level type of automation as well that's happening. So we see, of course, a lot of finance departments that are, that have invested in RPA, but their desire to automate doesn't go outside of the finance department. It's a very sort of departmental type of implementation. And you also have people that are interested in automating their daily task, right? And these are people that might have leverage on our community edition and learned it and then automating parts of their work, right? When it comes to our recommended approach, it's really about combining both the top down and bottom up effort, right? You have a company-wide initiative that's well funded, right? Well coordinated. You have typically an RPA center of excellence that's sort of managing the top-down effort, but at the same time, that center of excellence is also supporting a lot of the bottom-up initiatives, where it's the individual workers themselves that are identifying processes to automate and are the ones that are also building the automation, right? So of course, when we talk about a bottom-up approach, you could have what we call automation users, meaning they are the ones that have a process that needs to be automated, but maybe they're not so keen or don't have the time to actually pick up the skill to do RPA development, right? So they're what we consider simple automation users. Someone who needs to build the automation for them and they consume it. But when in a bottom-up approach as well, there's what we call citizen developers, or some companies would call them the digital champion. These are people that have taken up the skill to develop automation, to maybe automate the tasks that they work on, or at the same time automate work that's done by their department, right? And by combining these two approaches, we feel that the company can really accelerate the benefits that they're getting from their investments in RPA or their investments in automation, right? So both efforts should be complementary and hopefully technologically compatible, meaning you're using the same tools and platforms for your top-down and bottom-up approach. Although that's not to say that I haven't seen companies that have adopted different tools, because there are companies that have adopted Uipath and one of the competitive products, and they maybe use Uipath for the bottom-up initiative, but a different tool for their top-down. I've also seen customers that have used Uipath for their top-down initiatives, but a different tool for bottom-up. Maybe the citizen development tool that they're using, they prefer to use a different platform, right? So again, of course, it's better to have the same tools being used, because if you have a bottom-up approach, you do want guidance from sort of experts that might be part of your center of excellence. And the experts are typically busy with the interdepartmental type of automation or automating the more complex processes, but they should be carving out time to support the citizen developers, maybe hold clinics every fortnight, so that if you're a citizen developer and you're stuck, you do have the avenue to get support from someone more experienced, right? And it's kind of hard to do if the tool that the COE members are using is different from the tool that the citizen developers are using. So we do feel that the effort and the tools that are used should be compatible. Okay. All right. So again, top-down, from a discovery perspective, when we talk about top-down approaches, you typically, again, it's driven by specialized teams or a center of excellence, because we're talking about, again, complex interdepartmental process. They typically use tools like, process mining, task mining. Process mining is about, using the data that's in your back office to identify bottlenecks that exist in processes, so that you can apply either automation or business process re-engineering to eliminate that bottleneck. Sometimes it will involve bringing in, a Six Sigma black belt to maybe analyze that process, identify improvements that can be made to make that process more efficient. and effective, right? Task mining, usually we look at the work that people do on their computers to identify repetitive processes that could potentially be automated, right? So I would say the top-down approach, typically we rely on more scientific techniques to be able to identify processes um, that could benefit from automation. But when we talk about the bottom-up approach, when we discover processes that can be automated, we typically go with a crowdsourcing type of approach, right? Um, you ask people to submit ideas about what processes could benefit from automation, right? And in Uipath, we actually have a tool called Automation Hub that allows us to document and capture automation ideas um, that are raised by employees within the company, right? Because one way to really make sure that we, capture automation ideas is to ensure that there's a proper system to document and track each of these ideas. And on top of that, of course, every idea needs to be assessed. Is that particular process suitable for automation in the first place, right? If that process depends a lot on, handwritten notes, then maybe it's not so easy to automate, right? Or that process has, you have 1,001 ways to actually perform that process. So it's again harder to automate. But if your assessment says, oh, the input is electronic, there's only a handful of ways to go about doing that process, and the process is fixed, it's mature, then the feasibility for automation goes up, and the readiness for automation is also higher. So you do need a tool to capture all these ideas and perform assessment. And really what I wanted to do at this stage is just to quickly switch over to Automation Hub, which is that again, the tool that I said allows us to capture automation ideas and perform assessment. So I have here an example, an idea that I've submitted. It's called the three-way matching. Let me just close that and sorry. It's blocking my view. But yeah, so this one is the three-way invoice matching. What I'll do is just open this up, right? And I'll show you the information that I've captured here about this process. So I've described that process as a three-way matching where I compare the delivery receipt, the invoice, and the PO to ensure that we are paying for goods that we already received, right? So this is a very typical process in a finance team, in the procure to pay process, right? And I've indicated here that it takes me 10 minutes of manual work to perform this, and negative impact if payments are delayed then we are unable to take advantage of the early payment discount, right? And delayed payments also prevent us from negotiating better prices from our suppliers, right? And I put in an assessment. Is my process rules based? Is the input type digital or paper based? The input quality, is it structured or unstructured? Stability of the process. Are we expecting any changes in the process and the systems that this process is interfacing with, right? Maybe my ERP is being upgraded very soon and process stability might be low because there's a major upgrade to be expected. But minor changes are expected in this process. I've done my high level assessment. And of course, it's also good to capture the process volumetry, right? How frequently do we do invoice matching? It's a daily process, 200 three-way invoice matching performed in a day. Right? It takes me 10 minutes each time. There's an error rate of 2%, rework time of 10 minutes, and so on and so forth, right? So we're putting in those process volumetry. And we indicate here what applications are used by this process. It's SAP and our content management system where I store all the invoices and the purchase orders, right? So with this set of inputs based on Automation Hub's assessment, we could save 6,000 plus hours, right? And from ease of implementation, it's around 70 plus %. And in automation and feasibility, right? it's around 70+% as well. Actually, it's here. Automation potential 71%, ease of implementation 72, and calculates the benefit for the company in terms of hours saved and in terms of money saved, right? And how many FTEs can be redirected to higher value activities, right? They're all documented here. And if I have, let's say, 10 ideas that came in with all of these assessments being done for those 10 ideas, then it's easier for me to identify, okay, this becomes our priority because we can see a significant amount of time savings versus maybe other ideas, right? And of course, we have cost benefit analysis, right? Shows you, okay, pre-automation, this is the cost of managing that process. Post-automation, there are some still costs because obviously RPA costs money. There's licenses, there's infrastructure that you need to put in place. But at the same time, hopefully, the cost is much lower than the manual cost, right? The pre-automation cost. Therefore, you get some benefits, right? So again, it's very important to sort of go through this process of identifying automation opportunities and doing assessment. And I would say, of course, in Uipath, we have this solution called Automation Hub, but we do see some of our other customers that just leveraging on their existing SharePoint system. Some of our customers are just putting automation ideas in an Excel spreadsheet. But I think what's most important is that you capture all the information that I, shared earlier, right? What challenges are we facing about that process? The process volumetry is very important. Assessment of, these 5 areas here, right? Because this tells us whether what the automation potential and what the ease of implementation is. In fact, if you attend the business analysis course in our online learning platform called Uipath Academy, we share an Excel spreadsheet that allows you to fill in all of these information so that you can perform an assessment, simple assessment using an Excel only. But of course, if you're keen to explore Automation Hub, it's also available for access through our automation cloud, right? And you can sign up for a 60-day trial if you want to test this out to see if it suits your purpose. Yeah. But again, in this area called discovery, what's really important is to continuously build pipeline, an automation pipeline, so that you have the ability to either assign more process to be automated by your central team, or say, yeah, this process is simple enough that we can enable the digital champions or the citizen developers to be able to automate the more simpler department level or individual task level type of processes. Yeah. All right. So before we move on to stakeholders, I think it might be a good time to take a 10-minute break. I'll stay online. I got everything I need in front of me, but you guys might want to stretch your legs and buy a break, get some water, get some snacks. So 10 minutes. So let's come back. It's 4:10 and 4:08 actually. Let's come back at 4:20. We'll give you 2 extra minutes. Is that okay? I guess it should be. All right. So let's take a 12-minute break, and I'll see you back on Zoom at 4:20. And let's get started again. So before we went on break, we were actually talking about the dimensions for scaling, right? So we talked about the overall approach, which is combining a top-down and bottom-up approach. We also spoke about how do you do process discovery and how do you prioritize automation opportunities, right? We talked about how to sort of combine a top-down and a bottom-up approach, and how to potentially use tools like Automation Hub, which I just demonstrated, or even tools like Excel and SharePoint to be able to capture automation ideas and assess them and then prioritize them. And it's very, very important to sort of ensure that you have you're constantly building pipeline for automation, because this is really how you can get your automation program to be, to be funded, to show results, and at the same time ensure that more and more people participate in your automation program. Um, so let's continue on with the third dimension there, which is really, you know, stakeholders, right? So I think it's obvious why we need the support of the CFO, because usually it's a CFO that will fund an automation program. Of course, you also need to involve the heads of major business units and departments, right? Like if you're a bank, you might need sponsorship from, the consumer banking side, commercial banking side, wealth management, etc., etc. If you're, in manufacturing, you'll need, your production team to be bought in to RPA. You need, your sales team, your marketing teams to be bought in as well. And usually, if you have, a shared service, right? Like for example, a lot of the IT, finance, HR processes are handled by um, a central team, especially for large um, conglomerates, right? You have, let's say, large companies that have investments in real estate, in um, in retail, maybe in manufacturing, etc., etc. They all have, finance, HR, and IT as all, common back office processes, and let's say that large conglomerate set up a separate subsidiary to handle a lot of these back office functions. Typically, you would want support from that sort of support services or shared services head as well, right? Of course, the CIO, since typically when you adopt an automation program, you do deploy certain, compute storage and network to support. You need compute storage and network to support the execution of the robots. The orchestrator is what we call it. That it's the software component that manages the execution of the automation, etc., etc. You do need the support of the IT team to be able to do that. Support from the CHRO, or the chief personal officer, or the chief HR officer, because oftentimes they have to look at the possibility of having to redesign certain jobs when you're incorporating automation in the process. Or at the same time, a lot of CHROs are looking to upskill their employees, right? And typically, automation could be one of those programs that we can be put in place to ensure that our staff are ready for the future, right? Or are future ready. So enabling them on technologies like RPA could certainly be one of the things that could be part of the learning and development program for your CHRO. Of course, IT security, because when you deploy robots, so do they use the credentials that are used by a person, or would you be giving the robots their own credential, treating them as if they're real employees, right? Onboarding robots like you would onboard a brand new employee. So IT security definitely has a say in terms of what needs to be done in that area. And of course, your chief compliance officer or your internal audit, to ensure that when you automate a process, that you still follow, the standard best practices, and you're not violating any of the internal and external compliance rules that you have to abide with, right? So these are the stakeholders that you need to definitely interface with when you're, driving to scale or to advance your automation program. And from a talent perspective, you do need to ensure that you have the right skill sets to to manage the different steps in automating a process. And usually you have the business steps, right? It's identifying the process to automate, it's assessing the process that needs to be automated, the redesign that needs to happen, because sometimes you can't automate a process um, as it is, right? You do need to redesign, maybe have some standardization put in place before you automate. And of course, user story definition, right? Like um, basically coming up with the design of how the process would look like once it's automated. Is there still a need to involve a person, and what stage of the process is that person involved, and so on and so forth, right? So you do need to make sure that you accomplish these business steps. And once those are done, you typically move on to the technical steps, right? Which consists of development, UAT, hypercare. Hypercare is about putting the automation into production, but monitoring it very closely to ensure that the outcome that the robots are producing is exactly what it used to be, um, and ensuring that if any steps in the process were to fail because the robot, let's say, was initially designed to work with the test environment, now that it's connecting to the production environment and production is not exactly the same as test, then maybe certain steps are not working as designed. So you do have that 2-week period to ensure that the robot is working well, give the opportunity for, let's say, the RPA developers to make corrections to the automation. And then once you've completed hypercare, typically a period of 2 weeks, and robot seems to be working fine, delivering results as expected, you move on to BAU, or business as usual operational support, right? Where you have people that are constantly monitoring the health of the robots, ensuring that they're able to receive work and execute work, and ensuring again that all the transactions that robots need to process are executed. And this, you do have that sort of ongoing operational support that's required. And to ensure that you're able to accomplish all of these steps, you do need to make sure that you have the right talent in place, right? So for the top-down automation, as you can see, since we're dealing with complex interdepartmental type of automation, you typically need really specialized skills, right? You have the process subject matter expert, the person from finance who understands how to do three-way matching of invoices, right? Uh, if you want to adopt an agile methodology for RPA development, you typically have a scrum master, right? A process analyst. His or her role is to document the as is and also design the to be, right? For more complex automation, typically you have an RPA solution architect as well that looks at whether the design that the process analyst has created is sound, that it follows standard security best practices, and does not violate any of our compliance and audit rules, right? So you do need to involve a solution architect as well. Of course, you need an RPA developer that will develop the automation, security specialist, maybe on a consultant, sort of a advisory basis. They probably don't need to be full time, but certainly you need to get their advice, and someone from IT infra to ensure that robots are configured, that you have access to the right test environments during development, that you have access to the production environment when you're now running your automation in production. So you'll see tick marks on the right side here of when these particular talent or expertise are required, which step in the development process these particular expertise are required. So if you see a dark green check mark, they're heavily involved. If it's a light green or a check mark green outline, then it means they're probably consulted or only providing advice during that stage or during that step of the process, of the development process. Yeah. However, when you talk about a bottom-up approach, you typically have less people involved. You have your end users who are identifying the process that needs to be automated, right? And these are people that will not be doing the actual development. So their involvement in development is probably to validate that the development is, on the right track, that the robot that's being developed is what they are expecting. But they come back when it's time to do UAT, because they have to make sure that the automation that's been developed is producing the expected results, right? And of course, they're also in charge of the operational support, because sometimes even though a process has been automated, you still have a person that's accountable for the outcome, right? So end users are typically still involved in the operational support, ensuring that the robot's doing the right thing again, and so on. And you have the citizen developers, the power users or the digital champions, and they're the ones that are maybe doing assessment, defining the user stories, doing the actual development, and of course leading the UAT, right? And the experts from the COE team are not involved in majority of the steps, but they might be consulted on a regular basis. Like for example, during the time that the citizen developer is developing the automation, he or she would need access to someone with a lot more experience in RPA development. Maybe because I'm stuck, I don't know how to, let's say, um, automate attaching a document into an email, right? After attending a course on Uipath Studio, I still don't know how to do it. Then maybe consult an expert or someone who has more experience to be able to support that citizen developer. And of course, from an operational perspective, COE would probably provide some guidance as well and some advice on how to ensure that it runs well in production. Okay, so as you can see, you have the top down and the bottom up approach requiring sort of different skill sets, and this gives you an idea of what skills you need to put in place to ensure that you're able um, to be successful on both your top down and bottom up approaches. Okay, and in terms of funding, I kind of talked about this earlier, where you want to move away from business case, getting funding on a process by process, to hopefully being able to secure a multi-year funding, because you have a business case for both your top-down and bottom-up approach, right? And this is what you now call a funding for the whole program, as opposed to a project by project type of funding. And this is what it would typically look like if you have a multi-year global funding or company-wide funding, right? First is you need to allocate the right amount of budgets, right, across your individual task automation, your departmental automation, and your company-wide automation. But at the same time, you'll be setting different types of KPIs, right? Like for example, for the company-wide automation, the KPIs could be, increase efficiency, and maybe you're looking at supporting a lot of the strategic initiatives of the company, maybe around cost reduction, around improving the top line, improving the bottom line, minimizing risk, and so on and so forth, right? However, if you look at the opposite, which is the individual task automation, the KPIs that you would set would be typically, how many people have been trained to do their own automation, and how many individual tasks has been automated by our, let's say, citizen developers, right? And you of course have departmental KPIs as well. Maybe, as a department, we want to be able to pay all our supplier invoices on time, or ahead of time, let's say 2 days before, for 90% of our invoices, right? So you do work towards achieving those KPIs as part of implementing automation for a specific department. Again, the automation project supports the KPIs of that particular department. Okay, so again, global funding, KPIs across all the different tiers, and measuring the success of your automation program by looking at the KPIs for all the different tiers, the company-wide, departmental, and individual task automation. And yeah, this is sort of what we refer to when we say securing a global or company-wide funding for your automation program, and not have to ask for funding on a process by process or project by project basis. Okay. Although we do acknowledge that a lot of companies start off with, sort of project process by process funding, but eventually, if you want to scale your automation program, you do need to look at a company-wide funding. And again, by engaging the right stakeholders at the C level, then you have a higher chance of getting that company-wide funding. And you also need to look at the operating model, right? So the operating model that you adopt will really depend on the approach that you take. Do you have a top down? Do you have a bottom up? Or do you have a combined approach, right? And the size of your company and the geographical spread. Of course, if all your subsidiaries and all your employees are in Singapore and maybe they're all located in the same building, it's a lot easier to maintain sort of maybe a centralized operating model. But if you're a large multinational with presence in Asia Pacific, in Europe, in the Middle East, in Africa, in the US, then it's harder because of the time differences and so on to be able to centralize all the development and all the decision making. So you might need to have COEs in every major geography to ensure that you have a team that can support the automation initiatives that's happening within those geos, right? Of course, your organizational culture as well play a role as to whether you have a very centralized type of approach or you leave it to the individual business units uh, to run their automation program with guidance from a central team, right? And of course, your maturity. Uh, if you're early in your adoption of automation, then you might be able to really go with a central team with staffed by a few people, or maybe even seek external help, maybe get a system integrator to help you with your first few projects, right? But eventually when you want to scale your adoption and go for a robot for every person, or having a citizen development program, then that's the time you probably have to build up you know um, expertise, as well as hire more people, or allocate more headcount into the center of excellence, right? And it's really about figuring out who does what is the what are the business units responsible for. Would they simply be submitting processes that they want to automate, or will they take on the development work themselves, right? Will IT play a part, or is IT going to just provide advice in terms of IT infra, security, and so on? Or will IT actually be providing developers to develop automation? Will they be assigning some of their business analysts that have been, doing analysis on application development projects to now support the automation program as well? So again, figuring out what role IT plays, and do you set up a COE, and what sort of talent, what sort of roles, what sort of responsibilities will the RPA COE take on, right? So here's an example of an operational COE, a COE that actually takes on a lot of responsibilities. So you have your RPA organization leader, project managers, developers, process analysts, and so on and so forth, right? So this is a team that's dedicated to running your automation program. And the business entities, of course, are the ones that are submitting automation ideas. Their process owners are uh, requesting that process A, process B, process C should be automated, and they assist in terms of prioritizing which process to automate first. And they're also involved in redesigning the process. But a lot of work is done by the RPA COE. But there's also a different mode where some of these roles, like RPA development, business analysis, these are roles that you're building up within the business entities, right? So that they have the ability to actually be self-sufficient. But the RPA COE then provides the guidelines, as well as the advisory, as well as the clinics to really support the different business units. So it could be, again, your COE could look like this, or it could be, a very lean team in the COE that only provides advisory, and a lot of the heavy lifting is done by the business entities. So we've seen those two types of approaches. But at the minimum, any RPA COE should be performing these activities, right? the operating role, especially when it comes to interdepartmental type of automation. They're the ones that are discovering, selecting, re-engineering, developing, and monitoring the automation. An advisory role for any departmental automation, right? The COE should be holding clinics, providing a helping hand when departments are automating their processes, and potentially delivering trainings and train the trainer sessions, right? Because you do need to enable, let's say, a digital champion within the various departments to then deliver the training to anyone within their department that wants to, take on RPA, right? Curation and control of the bottom-up automation, right? That's one thing that the COE team needs to do. And of course, things like setting up the methodology, the standards, running the trainings, as I said, experimenting with, um, peripheral technologies that might allow us to automate more and more process, like investments in AI and document understanding and process mining. And the COE typically maintains the relationship with the tech vendors and the SIs that might be involved in your RPA program or your automation program, right? So a quick recap, right? Again, the different dimensions of scaling, right? Overall approach, method for discovering, prioritizing automation. How do you get upper level management support and alignment? How do you, organize your teams to ensure that you have the right talent in place for your automation program? How do you ensure that you get the, right funding, whether it's process by process or company wide funding? And again, operating model. So I guess I'll take a pause here because I do want to make sure that if we continue on in this series of providing you with knowledge around how to advance and scale your automation program, that we're able to cover certain topics in greater detail. So what we can do at this stage, and Don, maybe you can help me monitor the chat box, is what we can do is just get sort of a poll from the audience. If we were to run another event, let's say next quarter, which dimension of scaling would you want to learn more about, right? Is it the how do you combine a top-down, bottom-up approach? Would it be in the area of doing discovery and prioritization? Would it be around how to get support from C-level, from high management, talent, funding, or operating model? So if you can just type in your interest in the chat window, and actually, yeah, Don also put in the chat the various topics that we can cover in the next event, then it will help us prioritize based on what you want to learn about.
Yeah, I might have left off the first one. I apologize. So yeah, so you can just refer to Matt's slide and use those numbers and just give us, we just want a pause of which of these dimensions are of most relevance and interest to you.
Yeah, and you can also pick two topics, right? If you want to hear about 1 and 3 or 1, 2, and 3, right? So, it would, because some of these sessions, I would say, could be combined. We don't necessarily have to have another 6 sessions to talk about all these things, but it will allow us to prioritize which ones you want to learn more about. Okay, so continue to do that while I move on to the next slides. Although you do need.
You want to take a question, Matt? We actually have a question, one question in chat as well as one in the Q&A. Okay. Maybe while you leave the slide on, you can take 5 minutes.
Yeah, let's leave the slide on. And then do continue to put in your suggestions for topics for the next session in the chat window. I'm looking at the question now in the Q&A. What are some of the adoption rates, attended robots versus total, I guess, versus the total FTEs for more successful implementations of a robot for every person, a robot for everyone strategy? Yeah, that makes, that's a really, really interesting question. I would say I do have an example that I want to talk about later, which is PwC, where they have a robot for every person program within PwC, and they're now at 50,000 deployed attended robots, right? Of course, it could be a combination of attended robots as well as studio, right? Because at some stage you're developing automation, but at some stages you're only consuming automation. But they're now at 50,000 desktops, right? That have either studio or a robot running. But that actually just covers US and Mexico, right? And they're still in progress in terms of deploying that a robot for every person strategy across the whole of PwC globally, right? So I would say adoption rates, if you look at the number of robots deployed versus the total number of employees, even for the more mature ones, they're probably still in the low 20% or 20% and below. We haven't really seen a customer that's deployed like robots on 70%, 80% of their employees. And of course, we're also saying, we're not saying that a robot for every person is something that you can deliver overnight, right? It is a journey. And even for mature customers, like for example, Nielsen, right? They're also a customer of ours, the advertising company. Um, they're they it took them a few years before even getting started with a robot for every person, because they started with the peppered automation approach, right? Having a few attended robots, a few unattended robots, then moved on to having a sort of a centralized team that supports their RPA program, and maybe at that point in time 100 robots. And then 2 years after they started, they haven't even rolled out a robot for every person, yeah, literally, but they have at least now a program to support that vision. Okay, so it is a multi-year journey, I would say. So thanks for the question, even though you did not leave your name there. It was an anonymous attendee, but thanks a lot for that question. There's another question from Farhad Ismail. How many documents would you have to scan to get 99% accuracy of your ML tool? All right, that's a very good question, actually. So I did mention earlier that document data capture technologies are maturing, right? But in terms of accuracy, there's a lot of factors in play, right? Of course, when you talk about training a machine learning model, we're typically looking at hundreds of samples per template. Like for example, if you have, you know, um, 100 suppliers, maybe if you're able to provide 100 samples per supplier, right? And what we can do is use the samples that you provide to train a document model, and that will certainly increase the accuracy of that model. But at the same time, the accuracy of extraction also takes into account the performance of the OCR engine that you're using and the quality of the document that you're receiving. So if someone gives you a dot matrix printed document, then obviously the accuracy for capturing data from a dot matrix printed document is going to be a lot lower compared to a laser printed document, for example, right? So there are a lot of factors in play, but typically when we talk about document training, we do need to provide, you know, hundred samples at the minimum typically. But this is also something that you don't have to, sort of train a model with 100 documents up front. Train it with whatever you have at the moment. And usually the technology that uses machine learning for document data extraction has the ability for that model to be retrained on an ongoing basis. So if you onboard more suppliers, you can do the retraining. If you have more samples to provide to increase the accuracy, you can perform the retraining. And that's actually how our document understanding capability works as well. Okay.
Hey, Matt, there was a question that was in the chat.
Yes.
I think it was from Annie. Let me
Yeah.
scroll up. Yep. Right before my message.
Yes.
Yep.
Who are the folks involved in automation redesign, hypercare in the bottom-up approach? Yeah. So very good. So usually when we talk about bottom-up approach, since we're doing task automation, there's typically no redesign required, but there might be a need to standardize, right? And typically it would be the process owner themselves that are involved in that, right? In that sort of redesign or standardization. Because typically it's a matter of just understanding, okay, robots do require a specific input format, right? The more structured, the better. So if I move my, let's say, if someone's sending me an email with in the body they're indicating the part number, the quantity, right, that they're requesting for. If I want to automate that process of maybe providing a quote based on the part number and the quantity, then I would probably want to standardize on an Excel format. So as a process owner, I will just make that decision that this is now the way you should be communicating to me when you're sending me a request for a quote. You need to attach an Excel and it should be in this format. So usually it's the process owner themselves that are involved in the redesign. And in the hypercare, when on a bottom-up approach, it's also the process owner because now it's a process owner that's maybe running that automation and has the ability to then indicate and understand whether the robot's performing what it's supposed to. Usually hypercare is a lot shorter in a bottom-up approach because typically when you design an automation as a citizen developer, you're using your own laptop, you're using the production system to design that automation. So there's not a whole lot of potential issues that we will encounter when you're running it eventually in BAU mode, right? Because you're not having to deal with the differences between a test environment and a production environment. But if you have a COE, and typically the COE, let's say if I'm developing invoice matching, I'm probably not looking at the most recent invoice when I'm building the automation. I'm looking at maybe invoices that have already been in the system in the test environment, and maybe they're not even real data, they're just test data. So there's always that chance that the test environment doesn't look exactly like the production, and hence hypercare is a lot more important in the, I would say, the top down. But I wouldn't necessarily dismiss the importance of it as well in bottom up, because once a person develops an automation, or maybe someone else developed it for him and now I'm running it, I do need to make sure that the robot's still doing this, it's doing the right thing, right? So I would say, yeah, to answer the question, it's typically the process SME that is involved in the automation redesign and the hypercare, with maybe advice from a more experienced person, like someone from the COE team. All right. Um, let's see what else. There are still some questions. I think questions about the recording. So yes, they will be made available in the SCS website. Does the end user from Kartikeyan, does the end user treat this as competition and may feel, I guess, threatened to their job? How to bring them on board? So yeah, I would say change is off, is sometimes difficult to accept for some people, right? If they're comfortable with what they're doing, they're happy with what they're doing within the company, maybe introducing automation will be sort of received as a threat. But the reality is, in at least our experience as a vendor that supplies RPA technology and services, we do see most people embrace automation, right? They don't see it as a threat, because the reality is when we talk about RPA, we're actually automating work that people don't want to do anyway, right? These are work that's mundane, repetitive, boring, and uninspiring, right? And therefore, in our experience, don't hesitate in introducing RPA to your teams, And I would say that your experience will be very similar to our experience, where if once you start introducing this capability and this, the capability of RPA to the various teams in your company, that you'll actually see that they'll embrace it because they will see it as a way to eliminate a lot of the boring work that they have to do on a daily basis.
I just want to add on to this point. This question is very interesting. And I'm pretty sure amongst us, there are some who are slightly, what I call the older generation, and there are definitely those that are the Gen Z and the millennials. And as we look at when more and more of the millennials and the Gen Z joins the workforce, I think there is that sense of expectation that they might be more of the digital natives. They are more comfortable with automation. And hence, I think in a way, it's also making sure that your employees continue to feel satisfied in their jobs. It is, in a way, helping with talent retention.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if the company can position it in this angle, it's not just always about saving FTE, reducing cost, but it's also about generally uplifting and helping the whole company to move in that digital direction. Yeah, just my 2 cents, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Don. So I think that's it for the questions. We still have 3 minutes, so if you have questions, just post it on the chat window or the Q&A box. But I did want to go through a few more slides. I did talk about PwC and how they have robots and studio now on 50,000 over desktops across their US and Mexico business, but at the same time, they're continuing to roll out across the world, right? And the way the approach that they took is the top down and bottom up. They have enterprise-led automation, they have a COE that are looking at industrializing high-value automation, but they also have a citizen-led automation approach, right? Where micro tasks are automated by the end users themselves. But if some of those micro tasks could lead to benefits that could be derived by a larger team, then they have the ability to distribute those automations as well, right? Because sometimes there might be similar work that's performed by a totally separate team. Like, for example, obviously PwC is in the business of consultancy, audit, etc., etc. There's definitely plenty of reusable automation that they can, that they're able to develop, and once they distribute it, it benefits a lot more people. And yeah, again, to become a fully automated enterprise, as I said earlier, discovery and building up your pipeline is very, very important. We need to ensure that we empower everyone to automate, find opportunities to take advantage of AI and machine learning capabilities to make robots more smarter. And again, don't be shy in sharing the success stories that you have with the rest of the company, because if you don't share success stories, then again, you're not encouraging people to actually embrace automation. But if you are sharing the successes that you are having on a regular basis, then it just encourages more and more people to participate. And I do feel that one of the more important skill that to have in your RPA COE is actually a lot of the soft skills. It's not necessarily just technical skills or RPA development skills. You need people who can promote the successes, people who can articulate the benefits and the value that the company has received from their investments in automation. So make sure you staff your teams with people that have the right soft skills as well. And don't boil the ocean, right? On the outset, we all understand that even for the most mature enterprises, they're still not having a robot, literally a robot for every person. But that's a strategy, that's their goal. And will they ever hit 100%? Time will tell. But I think if you hit 20%, 30%, 40%, you'll start seeing a lot of the the savings, the I guess top line and bottom line benefits, right? And again, like I said, it's really a journey to long-term value and not something that you aspire to have overnight. Okay. So hopefully what the information that we shared was helpful. And if you want more information, like scaling automation the right way white paper or becoming a fully automated enterprise, we do have some materials around those topics. Or if you want to try UiPath for free, learn more about UiPath through our online learning platform, to hit up these URLs or take a picture of this QR code for the link to the white paper. And with that, I thank you guys for spending the last 2 hours with us. Thanks for all
Max,
your
I'm sorry
questions
to
as well.
interrupt you. For those
Mhm.
who have a little bit more time, you want to stay on, I think there's still some more questions on the chat. Yeah,
Okay.
but yeah, feel free. Yeah, I think that maybe we can take a few more minutes to answer those questions in chat.
Okay.
And I also believe there are 2 attendees who have raised their hands, but I need Camilla to unmute them. So if they have any question, they might want to go ahead and ask you live, since we have, we've come to the end.
Okay, so I shall unmute them, starting with Sulaiman, I think. Sulaiman. Okay, let me see.
Yeah, there was a question from
Okay.
Annie about the document understanding and modeling, yeah, ML model for document understanding. We do have a course in UiPath Academy, and we also have demos on our website on document understanding. So you might want to check those out.
Oh. I don't know why I can't unmute them. Are they able to
Yeah,
post their question?
you can unmute, but they have to 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 unmute themselves. Actually, what you're
Oh.
doing is you're just allowing them to unmute.
Oh, okay, okay. So do
if
they
you
want to
do,
talk?
so if Rafael and Sulaiman, if you have questions and you want to share your questions or feedback live, you could unmute yourselves. Or if you're shy, you can always just type your questions in also in the chat window or in the Q&A box.
Yep, and I did a quick tally on the poll earlier on. I think there are probably equal interests in both the first 2 topics, Matthew. So,
Okay.
so maybe this is good in feedback for us for next quarter's session. Maybe we can look into these 2 topics, the first and the second one. Yeah. But any one of you, if you have more feedback, let us know.
Mm-hmm. Sure. All right. Any more questions?
Okay. Is there any further questions? If not, actually, I would like, okay, let me see. You have a slide now, right, for them to scan the QR code?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So later you can also scan my slide on the feedback form. So appreciate if you all could also share your feedback on the topics or the, what you like us to organize for the, next quarter. And of course, we are planning to, if possible, to do a series, and then together with UiPath, we can actually continue our sessions. So far, we are very glad that it has been very good response, very well received. And we really thank all of you for your support. So any further questions now?
Is that the QR code that's on that we're sharing
Yes,
now?
yes, that's right,
Okay.
that's right.
Okay. So yeah, I stopped sharing and your screen came up.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much, Matthew. We're so glad that you set aside your precious time to come and share with our members. And
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
so far, and our response has been very good. Our feedback from the attendees, they really enjoyed the session. So we are definitely looking forward to more sessions to come.
Thank you. And thanks for
Okay,
having us.
good.
And thanks
Yeah.
everyone for your
Okay, thank you.
participation.
Okay, that's about it. Or let me see any more questions on the chat. With no headphone, only a speaker. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I think.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, sure. We'll be ending the session soon. Thanks, Matthew. Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
Okay.
Camilla.
Bye.
Thank you,
Okay,
Bo.
And
bye-bye.
Jing Ho. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.